And now while we get the second video teed up, this will be an interview with Dr. Roy Sanders, who was a co-author on that paper with Dr. Swinkowski, also discussing that paper.
Thank you for tuning in to the AO Monthly Journal Club. I have the pleasure and benefit of interviewing Dr. Roy Sanders down in Tampa, who was my mentor during fellowship year, on a paper from 1991 in the JBJS Journal about double plating comminuted unstable distal femur fractures. Dr. Sanders, thank you for spending your time with us tonight.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. That paper is, 30 years? Is that right?
Yeah, I was born just before it.
Yeah, amazing.
And I know you've had a lot of research in your experience, but tell me in brief what this paper has meant to you and how it's had a resurgence as of late.
Well, the paper really was a state of the art at the time, and it was an uncommon fracture. And I used my mentors, Dr. Rosen and Dr. Swinkowski, Dr. Helford, who was my partner at the time in Tampa, to collate these and look at them and see what the outcome was of these really difficult fractures.
You say Mueller et al. Recommended the use of this medial plate. Is that where you got the idea?
This is from 72. This probably had the double plating. This is unbelievable. So this is Phil Spiegel's book edition. You see that? And that's, who is that? That's Hans Villenegger. One is Martin Allgauer. And this one is Thomas Rudy. And this one is Stefan Perrin with a picture of the Davos Mountain.
There we go.
That's it. But there was never a series on it, so I reported on it because it was a real problem. I needed everybody's because there was no way to fix them. And this is the second edition from 79. When the condyles were shattered, then it became really complicated. How do you fix it with a blade plate? A blade can't hold anything, right? So then you put on, all you had was it's called a Burri, after Dr. Burri, B-U-R-R-I, and he came out of Ulm, U-L-M, so it was called the Ulm plate. And so you put on this plate, but it didn't have locking screws, right? So it really looks like a condylar plate, but it didn't have any locking screws. You put this on and the thing was flopping around. So how do you fix it? You put the medial plate on. But nobody really wanted to plate medial because of the neurovascular bundle there, you know? And so these things would fall apart, very limited implants. So it became a problem. And when I got to Tampa, and even when I was in Nashville in '86 and stuff, people wearing seatbelts, they were getting really trashed, but they were alive. And they started having all these high energy dashboard injuries because that's a dashboard injury. And there was no way to fix them. But we tried this and it worked. With bone graft, it worked. You have to remember there was no OTA really. And nobody understood fractures. Rockwood and Green did not teach you operative technique. It just taught you about fractures. So there was no YouTube, there was nothing. So the only way you could learn was to go to an AO course, excuse me. And they had written all these books and made all this equipment. So they had a complete method of fracture fixation. And the reason that they had these different screwdrivers was because when you use a large fragment screwdriver, right, you use your shoulder, your arm, there's a lot of torque, yeah, right? But they don't want you to do that with a small fragment screwdriver because you'll strip it. So they changed the handle so you could only do this and only use your forearm muscles. And then when you use a jeweler's, you're only using your intrinsics, right? So there's no way that you can, use all that torque. They're brilliant people. But I imagine this was presented at AO courses where you show, because they were very specific, like they just wouldn't let anybody lecture, right? So they gave the junior guys the simpler fractures, right? and give you very basic lectures. And if you didn't lecture well and didn't have good x-rays, you never got asked again to show up for a lecture. I mean, it was really awesome. So, and then there's more senior people, right, who had a lot of experience, would do the big fractures. Like Schatzker would always give the tibial plateau fracture lecture, right? Helfet would give the elbow. Helfet or Kellum would do distal femur. So the basic would just give you, you know, trapezoidal distal femur and be careful where the blade goes. When you get to the advanced course, which you had to prove that you actually went to the basic course and passed it. When you went to the advanced course, then they showed you these techniques. So these techniques were available. They're in the book. They went over them, but there was never a series of them. You know, somebody would do it once or twice. So, and I actually had to collect cases, which is why this paper has so many authors, right? So when I was, and really, I did my residency at joint diseases with Howard Rosen. Howard brought AO to America in 1965. And then, so I was trained by him, and he had a wealth of papers, a wealth of cases. And then when I went to Vanderbilt, I was with Swinkowski, and Swinkowski had one or two cases from, I think, from Nashville that I did with him as a fellow, and I think he had a case or two from Seattle back then. And then when I went to Tampa, I was with Helfet in the beginning because he recruited me before everything blew up in Tampa. And we had done a bunch of these, and I did a bunch of those. So it was the four of us, and we were all, you know, I was the most guy, but they were all very well respected AO faculty. And so this paper carried a lot of weight because we actually had clinical follow-up. They could show you that this technique worked in these really bad fractures. We were doing classic technique. You open it, you anatomically reduce it, you put all the fragments back together, right? And then you go ahead and plate it and bone graft it. And then you hope you win the race.
And then 2-year follow-up through multiple centers is also impressive as well. You think it was easier back then for follow-up or harder because of less communication and technology?
Well, these people, we put the, you know, so you're talking about 9 cases, right? So, you know, you put the fear of God in these folks, and you just don't let them go, and they're worried, and so you just keep watching them. And back then it was actually, I think people were less mobile in terms of moving around the country. And so they tended to stay put. And if you, you know, like they had a home number, right? So you always could get a hold of them somehow. Now it's really hard to get a hold of people.
What would you say now? Because there's a lot of other, obviously, distal femur fracture papers have come out of Tampa and from your group, clinical as well as biomechanical. Could you speak to any of those more recent publications you've been involved with in the context of this one and dual plating or nail plate combo?
I, over the years, have become a nailer. Although I love to plate, and I was raised and taught to be a plater, nails are just so load sharing and allows you to get the patient to walk and to bend their knee in this case so much sooner that I would rather do a nail plate combo now. Well, I'd rather do a nail, and if I can't do a nail because the fracture is too low and it's a stable fracture, I'll use a plate. But if it's an unstable fracture that's low with medial comminution, metaphyseal comminution, I would definitely use a nail plate combo. And the nail plate combo allows them to walk right away, move their knee right away, and that can help the healing. Perfect.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's good to see you.